Good evening. My name is Julia Simon, and I am Director of Exhibitions and Chief Curator here at the Bard Graduate Center. Tonight, it is my extraordinary privilege to welcome you back to BGC. Tonight, it's September. We're halfway through the first week of school, so we're especially pleased to welcome back our students and faculty. And as all of you already know, this evening's event also launches our weekly series of Wednesday night public programs. So we're additionally delighted to welcome back BGC's dedicated friends and community members whose valued presence creates such an exciting and dynamic atmosphere for engagement with decorative arts, design history, and material culture. We're so glad you're here. Tonight's event is even more special than usual because with it, we mark the reopening of BGC Gallery following a year of closure. I think so. It is thus with immense pride and pleasure that we invite you to visit Sèvres Extraordinaire sculpture from 1740 to today. A stunning and thoughtful presentation originally planned for last year of nearly 200 fascinating objects produced at France's famous porcelain manufactory. We extend enormous thanks to everyone, including our friends from Sèvres who are here with us today, who made this remarkable exhibition possible. But I won't say more about the project because instead I have the honor of introducing one of the exhibition's curators, Dr. Charlotte Vignon. She will be in conversation this evening with the distinguished artist, Arlene Shechet. Charlotte is a valued friend of BGC. In addition to spearheading this exhibition, she serves on our board, has taught in our graduate program as well. A New York-based independent curator, she's an expert in the decorative arts and a great champion for Sèvres, both the manufactory and the material. Now, before I hand the microphone over to Charlotte, I want to just take a moment to remind you that if you haven't yet seen Sèvres Extraordinaire, the exhibition will be open tonight until 8 p.m. If, however, the program leaves you hungry for more discussion and perhaps a snack, we're happy to be able to provide light refreshments in the seminar room next door. And so with that said, please join me in welcoming Charlotte Vignon.
So thank you, Julia. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Without further ado, let's start tonight's program. So for nearly 3 centuries, the Sèvres porcelain manufactory and the Sèvres Museum have preserved, enriched, and share a unique heritage. Together, these two institutions, which are located on the same site at Sèvres, just outside of Paris, celebrate the medium of ceramics with a deep appreciation for its form and techniques, and for the beauty of works of art produced throughout the ages. The manufactory was created in 1745 in the old royal Château de Vincennes with the goal to produce, quote, Meissen-like porcelain painted and gilded with human figures. At that point, it was called the Vincennes Manufactory. And here is a ball made at Vincennes around 1751-53 with inside the ball depicting the Château of Vincennes where the workshop was. In 1756, the workshop moved to the town of Sèvres, halfway between Paris and Versailles. Nearby was the Château de Bellevue, built for Madame de Pompadour here, Louis XV's mistress, and a porcelain aficionado who became a powerful advocate for the manufactory. 3 years later, the king, Louis XV, became the company's principal shareholder and took Sèvres under direct management and within the Crown estate. Under his patronage, Sèvres became the most important producer of soft-pay porcelain in Europe. From the moment that Louis XV assumed management of Sèvres in 1759, the manufactory had been the property of the French state. This special relationship was envied by other French manufacturers because it offered many benefits. One of them was that the manufacturer was not expected to make a profit. Instead, it was expected to enhance the global prestige of French art, a purpose also furthered by the tradition of gifting Sèvres porcelain to foreign dignitaries and aid of state. Another privilege was the exclusive use of gold. The Sèvres manufactory was the only ceramic manufacturer in France allowed to use gold on its pieces, becoming a signature of Sèvres porcelain still today. Another significant advantage was during the period of financial stabilities, the Sèvres manufacturer was able to invest in expensive technical research, and these benefits all the ceramic manufacturers in France. State patronage also attracting leading artists who were keen to work for the royal, imperial, and today national manufacturing. Perhaps more significantly, the manufacturer has avoided industrializations, allowing it to preserve and transmit its unique artisanal knowledge. Public ownership has also made it possible to preserve most of the Sèvres archive, a rarity among ceramic factories and a boon for scholarship. And you see here some of the molds that are conserved and preserved in the archive at Sèvres. There are, however, significant downbacks to public ownership. France's turbulent history has exposed Sèvres to a succession of financial and political crises, including revolutions, wars, and civil unrest. During the French Revolution, Sèvres endured severe budget cuts, and its traditional clientele disappeared. Despite continuing criticism that it was an institution producing luxuries for the elite, the manufactory has survived over 290 years. As the state changed, Sèvres remained a constant, accommodating itself to the taste and occasionally the political demand of new regime. Today, at the Sèvres manufactory, 120 artisans work in nearly 20 distinct workshops, all exclusively manual, and each with his own specialty. From the creation of the objects, actually the making of the paste, to the production of object, and to the shaping of the form, but also to the final decoration. In collaboration with invited artists and designers, the manufactory produced today a rich array of porcelain objects that are distinguished by their originality and exceptional quality. I'm showing you here all these pieces, by the way, are in the exhibition. I'm showing you here the centerpiece Duck and Water Lilies by French designer François-Xavier Lalanne. A vase created by the Japanese design collective Nendo. This vase was made by the American artist Betty Woodman. Here is the sculpture Odorie des Féminins by Belgian artist Johan Cretten. And this one called Eruption is by the Vietnamese artist Thun Van Tran. The manufacturer also collaborated with American artist Jim Dime, and you see him here working directly on a very massive vase. Here it's also Jim Dime, a piece by Jim Dime. And the German artist Christian Bischer, and who created also a very interesting piece also in the exhibition that is half architectural and sculptural, that is a modular almost screen in porcelain. Despite the international reputation of self-manufactured porcelain and its presence in large quantity in many museums in France and abroad, only one previous exhibition has been organized on the manufacturing long history, so telling the story of Sèvres from the beginning of its creation in 1740 until today. This exhibition was organized as a traveling exhibition in Asia in 2007, 2008. This exhibition, Sèvres Extraordinaire, is somehow extraordinary because it does tell this long and extraordinary story of the Sèvres manufactory through sculpture. Uh, and it's a collaboration between the Bard Graduate Center and the Sèvres manufacturer and the museum, and it's kind of a pivotal also moment for the Sèvres institution for many reasons to have all this piece here. With this exhibition, we wanted to tell that story, but we wanted to tell it through a less known part of this production, which is sculpture, and bringing to light the significant role of artist, designer, architect, and also the director of the institution in making that factory a success over these last 290 years. Here, sculptures is used in the broadest sense you can imagine. It includes extraordinary three-dimensional vase. And again, all of these pieces are in the exhibition, so I encourage you to go and see them. From the 18th century, 19th century, 20th century. It include wonderful centerpiece, extraordinary centerpiece made for the Empress of Russia in the second half of the 18th century. Beautiful centerpiece from the Universal Exhibition in 1900. He also include more contemporary centerpiece. He included inkstand made around 1800 under the directorship of Alexandre Brogna. This amazing sugar bowl, beautiful salt, so all kind of object, even for a set for smoker designed by the famous architect Carly Belleuse, rare bowls, the mythic breast bowl made for Marie Antoinette, and of course more typical object that you consider more typical as sculpture, busts, figurines, little figurines, contemporary figurines, medallions, and low reliefs. When I look at this array of objects and looking at them on the screen, I actually cannot imagine that they're all here. And I want to thank the Céline Paul and Soazig for making that. It's kind of quite extraordinary that they are in New York, all of these French treasures. So whether functional, decorative, or simply objet d'art, this sculpture dating from 1740 to today, alongside many drawings, a few rare terracotta and plaster models that also all belong of our treasure from the Sèvres archive and Sèvres manufacture. They all tell that story of this remarkable enterprise that have succeeded throughout the time. It's a testament to the quality of the craftsmanship over the years, but also of the constant innovation that the manufacturer has been doing over these years, and this extraordinary creativity that all of them artists have put together into this manufacturing. So many of these objects have never been seen in the US. Many of them are never been exhibited outside Sèvres. And again, take the advantage of immersing yourself into this subject, discovering them and rediscovering them, because it's quite unique. If the manufactory is a place of creation and innovation and scientific research, the museum, aside from its traditional missions as a museum, is also a place of research, and especially on the history of Sèvres, the Sèvres manufactory, and on the history of ceramic. The exhibition is accompanied by a very heavy and important volume published by the Bard Graduate Center, and it's mostly written. The main catalog, the text is written by Tamara Préau, who held the position of archivist at the Sèvres manufactory over 40 years, And unfortunately, she cannot be with us today, but she's in our heart. And she's also many member of the Sèvres curatorial team, or actually two, contribute to this important volume, including Soazie Gilma, who is here with us to celebrate the opening of this exhibition. So now, as a quick introduction to the program today, I'm just going to tell you how I met Arlene Shechet and how she helped me to become a better curator. So, as curator of decorative art at the Frick Collection for several years, I was responsible for organizing a few exhibitions in the museum Portico Gallery featuring the renowned collection of Meissen porcelain from the late Henry Arnhold. And that collection was a promised gift to the museum, and now was given and is permanently installed in the newly reopened Frick Collection. So at first, I organized a very traditional show in 2011 entitled White Gold, highlight from the Arnhold Collection of Meissen porcelain. But a few years later, I wanted to do something different. I wanted a fresh look at the Arnhold Collection, if you want, and but I struggled with that project. I didn't know how to do it. So as always in situation like that, I met with my friend Meredith Martin, professor at NYU, that many of you know, and I think she's here today with me. And she told me about Arlene Shechet. And she has just recently organized an exhibition at ResD, and we're going to learn more about this project. And I was quite intrigued because Arlene at that time was mostly known as an artist working with all type of medium, but not really with porcelain. She's not a ceramist, she's not a potter. But she had just completed at the time a residency at the Meissen factory, and she was now exhibiting her new work at the RISD alongside, and that's what interested me, alongside historical Meissen object, 18th century object from the museum permanent collection. So Meredith arranged a meeting, and I've just a few minutes, I think, realized that, or I realized that I wanted to work with her, and it was to my great surprise, or I was thrilled to that she accepted almost on the spot. The plan was very simple. I asked Arlene to select 18th century Meissen porcelain from the collection of Henry Arnhold and to install them in the Portico Gallery at the Frick Collection, alongside just a very few objects of her own. The resulting installation was lively, inspiring, and witty. She turned sculpture around to display their back. She flipped cup and saucer upside down to reveal parts rarely seen in traditional museum display. Her own work played gracefully with the 19th century counterparts. It was an exciting way to showcase porcelain, reminding us of the playfulness and endless possibilities that the medium offers, both in creating the work but also in displaying them. This exhibition was a huge success for the Frick because it attracted a new audience, mostly interested in contemporary art, to discover and appreciate actually an older part of production, an older work of art. And it was very interesting to talk with these people. Who, some of them have never been to the Frick, and they were looking and became excited actually about 18th century Meissen porcelain. So 10 years later, we are back here again, and we're going to talk more about porcelain, Arlene. But before, we thought that it was important for you to know a little bit more about her work, Arlene Shechet's work. So she's going to give you also about a 5-10 minutes presentation. And after we'll sit down and discuss, and we will take this conversation from you. So, yeah,
Such a pleasure to be here. Um, I'm going to just speak right off the cuff, and you can tell me when you need more explanation, and we'll have a Q&A afterwards, I think. But tell me when you can't hear me if that happens. But I'm going to be looking this way to see what slides are up. So we're going, as Charlotte already said, Germany. We're in Germany now, here. In 2012, 2013, I spent 2 years commuting between New York and Dresden and Meissen, where I first, for because of other work of mine, they invited me in a very open-ended way. I did not have to produce anything to sell. I just had to play, my favorite thing. And they gave me 2 studios and an apartment, and it was life changing. And a little bit now I have PTSD because I worked like there was nothing else to do there, and I worked like 18 hours a day. So, but I came back, and you'll see the results. Anyway, here it is, 16th century Meissen, Germany, and then the entrance to the museum. And you've already seen the gorgeous room of mold at Sèvres. And of course, this is the cleaned up room at Meissen. After 2 years, I finally got to the places where there were flies all over everything. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rooms filled with molds. This audience clearly knows everything came from a liquid into a mold. And when I first got there, I was like, I don't know about this stuff. I had never worked in porcelain before, and I was searching for what I would do. I knew I could just move around the material, but I felt like I needed to get a handle on a big project, and I decided that the industrial molds were the thing that were fascinating to me. And so what I did was I made plaster molds of their molds. And then I cast those molds in porcelain. And then I painted them as if they were not molds, but actual, fine shapes that they would have come up with. And you can see on the right, I took that. This is from my RISD Museum show. I took that cup pattern and I used it on one of those casseroles. So I call them casseroles. And here's another. I had to be there 2 years because I had to convince them that I could go in the mold room and work with the mold because they were sure I wouldn't be able to do it. The reason they're sure that I wouldn't be able to do it is because everybody, as Charlotte said, everybody is very specialized. So the fact that I did lots of things was not typical at all. They just called me a magician all the time. So this is industrial molds. I was riffing off of the onion pattern, which so I was making big onions, but using the idea of classic porcelain Meissen decorations and all their enamels you can see on the right, and actually making then I was like, oh, that on the left is a better sculpture than I could think of. So I'm going to make it into the sculpture. It's possible to draw in pencil on porcelain. So I would draw in pencil because I wasn't as good as they were at painting easily these very intricate patterns. I also did do all this other crazy stuff that was so enticing. It was just like being in a pastry factory. And while I was there, I had a show in Berlin right away because the person who had recommended me had a gallery in Berlin. So that was a connection. But we had no budget. So I used just all of the furniture from the factory. Okay, so all of that, I just had to beg them, all of that, except for that, the bottom thing was, the cheapest possible crappy thing you could get. But everything else was just part of the factory. So I moved parts of the factory to Berlin. I presented this stuff in Germany because the thing is, I'm actually do a lot with installation. So installation is my baby, is my passion. and how things are put together, how things are presented in surprising ways. And porcelain, given that, for instance, this is the RISD Museum. I went to RISD as a student the entire time. Nobody ever suggested that this porcelain room, which was donated by Abby Aldrich Rockefeller, along with one of the best porcelain collections in America, that anybody ever took me into this room or suggested I visit this room. So I looked in there and I said, I want to do a show here. I want to revive it. We did that. And the show was called Meissen Recast. And I used these cabinets to juxtapose my work with things that I found, but mostly a lot of their collection. And I used all these, classic, like mirrors are a thing. Well, I remember going to Henry Arnhold's house and he had these mirrored porcelain cabinets, and there's a big classic way of porcelain collectors showing off their porcelain, and I wanted to play with that. I love that, like that little saucer up top. I was like, that's the Agnes Martin up there. That's as good as any Agnes Martin can be. So here on the left, the head of the museum said, the monkey band, there are very few of these in America. These are a very famous piece, and we're so lucky to have it. It was on a shelf on the bottom. I was like, God, that thing is crazy. And we're not seeing how crazy it is. We're not seeing what these figures, these are artists who are working in the factory. I want to give them respect. You saw all that amazing Sèvres stuff. So I broke them loose of that little thing, and that they were standing on, trapped, and they got to play. And the RISD Museum was very compliant and financed my crazy installation ideas. And it was actually such a success because there's a lot of people in Rhode Island who have these historic porcelain collections. And now, because we've revived this, they are giving them to the RISD Museum. So people are, very pleased to get things out of the closet. There were twice as many things as they thought they had in storage after I spent about a year going through the whole thing. But that's the way it is. There's only so many people or so many things that you can discover as museum workers. So I had a show next at the ICA in Boston, a 20-year survey, and it was broken down into rooms. And one of the rooms, because the trustees from the ICA saw the show at the RISD Museum, they allowed me to do a pretty elaborate installation there. In this case, it was like 95% my work and only a little bit of historical work. On the left is a film, a small film of tableau vivant artists acting out Meissen figures, which is a must to see. Meredith Martin comes up again because her husband Josh turned me on to that film, and it was I love that film. Looking through into the next room and trying to create these tableaus. I had a lot of latitude because it was my show. I feel like people in the 20th and 21st century don't really know enough about the 18th century. And I have a passion for the 18th century, and that if we would only make the stuff more available, it would sing. So that's part of what I was doing. Here's the Frick, and Charlotte gave a great view of that already. But again, the idea was when I first came, it was a very sterile gallery. And yet we know that the Frick is a very sumptuous home. It's like, why does this look like a sterile gallery rather than part of a sumptuous home? Because it was a late addition. So I made furniture, they gilded it, we got wallpaper that worked with what was existing. On the left, you'll see the original lotus bowl that begat my piece that I made at Meissen. We tried to invite the garden in because it's a gorgeous gallery. And I was interested in having things slip and slide and not be so identifiable as what was mine and what was the Frick stuff. And I think that was more that you had to really look closely. And so that is one case. More stuff you've already seen, turning things around, turning things upside down. The audience that came, we had a lot of people from the Wallace collection. In Europe, this is an appreciated form. In America, a little less so. So the last thing that I did that just closed was Disrupt the View at the Harvard Art Museum. And this is a Renzo Piano building and glass enclosed. And my idea was, because it's also a university and people are out, my idea was, let's make it so there's something that people can see at night or during the day. They can peer through the windows. It's not that you have to walk in. So there was that. But additionally, it faced off on the Le Corbusier building, which I've long loved, and those great alcoves with the windows, which I then used. I mean, I think most people miss my reference to it, but I didn't care. That's basically it. As an artist, you just do what you want to do. And some, a few people get it, but it gave me the idea of how to make insertions into the wall. And again, using the mirror, but they're on an angle and really directly copied from Corb. In order to do what I wanted to do, because their collection was much thinner than most of the other collections that I'd work with. And it had a lot of plates though. So I devised this system so that I didn't have to decide beforehand, but could decide upon installation how things would twist and turn. An angle. So on the right is looking at it from inside, and then on the left is looking at it from outside. And then I could do my thing of showing the backs and the side, and not just, the full frontal view, which I'm a little allergic to. So you can see how things got to bend and twist, and it was really exciting. Took a long time to install, but it was really fun to do that. And then some of the other stuff, looping back to Sèvres. So should we talk about this now? So Sèvres, this is the Vase Japon. Charlotte has acquired this work for the Frick. The Frick recently asked me not recently, 2 years ago, asked me to do a project with the Vase Japon. The premiere piece has that gorgeous gold chain. These are the sister and brother. But it all really came, my investigation, indicates that it came from these Chinese prints, Chinese woodblock prints. And I just loved that. That the Vase Japon is actually born in China. I have been working on this project where I broke the vase down based on that print. So keeping the chain, keeping and making it all pattern. And then printing the it will actually reflect into the paper. Unfortunately, the exhibition just got canceled, but the book will come out in the spring, and maybe I'll find a good location for this. Anyway, that's it.
It does work, right? So this Vase Japon is actually a good starting point for the conversation because it is a very unusual piece of Sèvres, and that is indeed a show once again the amazing creativity of that manufactory. And it was designed in the 1770s as a one-off and created at the beginning. Very few of them, probably 3 or 4 were made, and it was made as the model. The original model was the print, that is a Chinese woodcut actually, that was sent to the manufacturer, and use and this was sent also as a way of showing. I mean, the Sèvres created this. It's one of the first piece of art paste porcelain produced at Sèvres, and has made that piece, this first art paste porcelain, which is the Asian traditional paste, as almost a copy of an Asian object. And usually, when you're familiar with Sèvres, they didn't create copies of Asian model at all. It was much more European shape. So this is a very atypical object. And I'm very happy that you are involved in recreating and relooping that object and make it understand it better. But let's go back to Sèvres and what you have been doing with all of this installation. I did insist that the fact that you made me a better curator, it's because you make me show this object differently and go back to the spirit of ceramic in 18th century, from the porcelain room in Germany. Or these objects were exciting. It was a new material, and they were always very often displayed in an interesting way. And over the years, we lost a little bit that because the 19th century came through and museum came through, and they became very much collectors and item put in cupboard and bibelot, and we stopped looking at it. One thing that I remember when we were working together on the Frick installation, and you were telling me, we are lucky as artists, as curator, because we can hold this object all the time. We know how to look at them. We can see underneath. We can weigh them and all that. And you wanted in your installation all the time that the public has the feeling of holding things and seeing things that we rarely see if it's just on a shelf in a very traditional way. So that was very very exciting for me, and something that I took, and I hope that I carry it. But today I want to
I think you did.
Yeah. I wish I can do more, but today we want to go back to the Sèvres exhibition, Sèvres Extraordinaire. I hope that many of you have seen it. Arlene, we visited this exhibition a couple of days ago, and also you are much more familiar with Meissen. You discovered almost the entire production of a manufactory over the years. It's a very much more traditional display than what we have been doing and what you have been doing. But what was your take of that show, or is there no specific installation, display, or object that you were particularly interested in and that you want to talk about?
So many things. One thing that comes to mind immediately is the inclusion of drawings. I love that you put the drawings in, because just a lot, that was an interesting revelation for me also, that many artists who worked with the manufactory, really just made the drawings. And then the incredibly skilled artists, let's just call them artists, working in the factory, took that information and brought it to life. So having the drawings and then some of the objects was really exciting for me. And the other thing, though, that really stands out, that I am particularly passionate about, is the broadness of the notion, being very broad about what we call sculpture. Because what is sculpture? I don't, for instance, feel that sculpture is necessarily, or in that show even, that the sculptures are the figurative things. I feel like everything is sculpture, and I think you included enough things that make that clear. So like that sugar boat, the breast cup, there are functional things. Why do we have to separate function from sculpture? And that was a huge issue that came up when I was working in the manufactory in Meissen, and one of the reasons I decided to work with the molds, and that I worked with the molds of functional things and made sculpture. And then they said, "Oh, you're making sculpture from those functional things." I was like, this lotus cup is just as good as most sculpture. And if you, in that Sèvres show, if you see there is, one of my favorite things is the ARP work by Jean Arp. And there is a great collage that he did, and just these gorgeous forms. And he certainly could have done like what Louise Bourgeois did, which is, of course, I love Louise, but the art really took his forms, a version of his forms, and spoke to the Sèvres and function. And I think that a vase is as good a sculpture, as good a sculptural form as anything else. And I feel, and that's why I like the idea of treating these things in the round and showing things, and we do not have to choose between function and sculpture. And that's it. I know in the historic manufactories they do, and they reproduce a lot of what they identify as sculpture. I know in Meissen, that goes on, those animals. But I like a plate.
And also what is interesting too, it's that most of the sculptor, as we know them, the Boiseau, the Falconet and so on, and even today, they design functional objects. They design some of them. So at the manufactory, also back in the time, there were actually some of them were Carrier-Bellius too was a sculptor, but he's also designed sets for tea sets and yours and so on. So that is the harp, that the vase that is also in the show that Arlene was referring to. And also what is interesting is the drawing that you should see is a collage. So it's a drawing that is also in 2 dimension.
There's the breast cup, so it could not be more contemporary.
So it is true that the insertion of drawings and terracotta models in the show this is also a Duplessis 18th century terracotta piece, it's a very important and rare element because they are rarely seen. There is also something that the fact that we have shown in the exhibition, we are punctuated. It's a chronological evolution from the 18th century to the 21st century. But time to time, even in the 18th century, there will be a little clin d'oeil with a contemporary piece to show that artists have I've worked with the same medium, the biscuit, the gold, the painting, and there is this dialogue in history that you have done in a very clever way at Meissen, and I think artists invited at Sèvres are also revisiting the repertoire and the history of the manufactory to create new body and work. And for me, as many of you know, I spent several years at Sèvres, and that was what's the most interesting. It was the fact that this manufacturer still today is still inviting artists, and we do, and they look, and it's that help to make the bridge between the past and the future in many ways. So my question to you is, what do you think is a good collaboration between an artist and an institution manufacturer of what make the success? You have seen Bourgeois,
Yeah.
Nando, and many other art. Many of them have worked at Sèvres. You've seen it; they're shown at the show. You have worked in a manufactory. What for you work and doesn't work?
Well, I feel so when I arrived, I didn't even know that my studios were going to be not on the factory floor or not in the rooms. I had my own palace of multiple studios, and they just had me there. You're the artist. And I rebelled a little against that because I feel like the success story is when there is overlap. And for me, I just, well, the first day I came, they said, okay, here's how you make things. You don't know anything about porcelain. Here's how you do it. And believe me, there's not a single thing I would do like that. But they were taught a tradition that has been lost. So I loved seeing it. And then when I did things, they were looking at me like I was crazy. That's never going to make it. That's never going to make it. Over and over, they would say that to me. And when I said, oh, you have this clear glaze that you spray everything with, what is that glaze and do when you just brush it? And everybody looked and said, we've never tried. This is, centuries. They've never
So you
tried it.
tried.
Yeah, so of course that's was essential, but they are held down, and yet they're inviting artists. So, but I don't think that the artists are really ultimately integrated. And I did so much research, and I know other artists did, on the glazes, and I did so many things that I could have given to them because I was using the salts in all kinds of crazy ways, and you know, and then it just got. I feel like it just got lost. They don't. There's not a vehicle for really transmitting the information back and forth. So I think a successful collaboration would be that there's constant conversation, but that's a different mindset than your average manufacturer, and I don't know.
Were they very generous with opening their archives? Did you have access to everything, or how did that communication was given?
Well, I did, but only because I didn't have a regular residency. I was there for 2 years, on and off, back and forth. So somebody who just does a regular residency. I don't think they do, but I got to know all the people, the head librarian, and I got into places that they said, "Oh, nobody's ever been in here," and so I had access. Like I just I could still be there and feel fed.
So
Uh,
time and immersion into the history, the workshop,
yeah,
even the artisan or artist who are working and passing or having this knowledge was crucial for you.
yeah,
Yeah.
completely.
Okay.
Completely. And I think that also from one artist to the next, there probably could be more of a thread.
So you reacted to one Sèvres object, the Vase Japon, which, as we already pointed out, is a very unusual Sèvres object, also beautiful and fascinating.
Really interesting.
If you have an object in the show that you would like to respond to, so by the way, we have a piece of Arlene here, which is one of these mold. It's quite exciting to have it here. And if you have the opportunity to react to an object in the Sèvres Extraordinaire show, which one will it be? Which
Oh, um, well, probably one of those. Well, I love this because you can really see how you can see the clay. You can really feel how that was made. I can see that in a way that was somebody taking a wire. And those of you who know how to work with clay know that there are like piano wires that you can pull across a bundle of clay, and that would give you that kind of texture. But I think this is pretty unbeatable because it does all the things I was talking about. It's a functional object. I might take it off of that gold stand. Uh, it's a functional object, but it is, absolutely both a painting and a sculpture. The color is mind-boggling that got fired, because pink is pretty much the hardest thing to do. The lines that are carved in, so it's both built and carved. So there's a lot of different processes involved in that I can relate to. Um, don't ask me. It looks like it is. I'm looking at it from underneath. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's in the show, it's like that.
And so also I like that. I like the modest scale. I love the breast cup is a very provocative, conceptual piece aside from
These two, by the way. I mean, when you imagine
yes.
that was done, built in, I mean, created in 1802 or 1803, something like
Mm,
that. I mean, how modern it was and how creative it was. I think it's very, but also this relationship with nature and how it's built on this shell and created something at the same time completely abstract and completely figurative. It's a very
yeah.
amazing thing.
Yeah, I mean it could almost be in the art deco part of the exhibition.
I mean, someone will design that today. We will just say that's fine. You know, it's
Yeah,
just like it's that, which is quite amazing when you think about that, about the fact that some of these artists and these objects were created, and they are so relevant even to today. So and that I
completely.
think is what we try to do with this show, is to also show objects that are not usually associated with Sèvres. It's
Yeah,
not the sculpture, it's not the falconet, the little figures. Like you too with Meissen, it's not the little figurines that
yeah,
it's different. It's also showing to the public and what we share And the BGC, actually, one of the mission of the BGC is also to share that, is that we are passionate about this object, okay, but we want also the public to be excited about this 18th century or 19th century object, and have the public excited about this old art form, and
Speaking to that, I also like what you did with the exhibition in terms of having the original plasters sometimes, and like in that basket piece, did I? Oh yeah, the this. So the having the original, that's probably the plaster, and then you can see how solid that is. And well, I'm mad for plaster. So and plaster was one of the first materials as a sculptor that I worked with as a primary material. But I can see how that was made, and I think it's so important that people can see, oh, it starts there. You don't have to know everything that happened, but you can see the hollowness then of this. So you know, without knowing exactly what happened, you know a lot of different processes, and we know molds and casting and liquids and multiple firing, many firings, um and then those crazy, now in this case I think and then the shrinkage. I was very interested in seeing that as a size, because that tells you how much the porcelain shrinks
because
when you see those near one another.
the show also tried to really highlight this creative process of
Yeah.
manufacturing. It starts with a design, an artist, a mind, an idea, but it's after a long process, and involve many people and very different steps to basically arrive to the final product. Shall we take a question from the public?
Yeah.
Let's do that. So.
If you have questions, please raise your hand and I'll bring the mic over.
Hi. The pink piece, who was the artist? Would he sign it, or is it just the company's name?
At Sèvres?
Pardon?
At Sèvres?
Yes. You know, is it the bowl, the pink bowl?
There is actually no signature on this one. There is none, right? No, there is not even the signature of Sèvres, I think. We
So the artist is not recognized.
It's very the process of signature at Sèvres, like in many manufacturing, it's not like an artist's signature that want to put his name. Very often is just related to the fact that he needed to be paid. So when the piece is go to the kiln, we know who paid and who made what, and also when sometimes you have in some of the sculpture the F of Falconet or so on, it's because the head of the workshop approved it. So usually a piece of Sèvres has multiple mark. You have the factory mark, you can have the painter, the gilder, the molder, but they don't always have objects. And my experience is that the most unique and odd object don't have mark, and it's just the way it is. But so these, we know that it's Sèvres because basically they were the plaster mold, and is in the archive, and so on. We have archival information that tell us that this piece was produced at Sèvres, and but the objects themselves, they don't systematically have marks. What I love with your piece, this one should be signed too, but usually the manufacturer is sign, and you have usually your name and the two the mark of the Meissen. So modern today, yes, some artists will sign, but it's not the signature as you will understand from a work of art from an artist.
In fact, the signature thing, I was unprepared for that.
It's a ceremony.
Well, I didn't really. I don't necessarily sign my work. I'm not a painter. sculpture isn't always signed. It's archived, but and recorded, but it's not always signed. And the first day they're saying, "Okay, signing time." And I really had to work. They have all kinds of props, you know, for your elbow, for your hand. It is so fascinating. I was like, this is a movie. To allow the signers, they were very experienced, and I only after a while got, you know, much better at it. But they insisted that they sign and I sign.
Another question?
So, as an artist, what is your take for longevity? Longevity. I mean, I'm not asking. You guys must go through like OD testing about your product and everything else. I'm not talking about that. But like, what's your take? Like, you want your work to be forever, or uh, what? And if so, what's your assurance for uh, materials and the productivities and all that stuff?
For you or for me?
I can't control history, so I'm not too worried about it. I'm just trying to do. I'm trying to do the best things that I can, and I'm happy when they end up in museums where.
Because whoever is gonna acquire your work, they want to protect their investment, and they don't want that to fall apart in 20 years.
Will not. There is this subject have survived 3 centuries, and some ceramic much more. But I think the longevity of manufacturing, like Sèvres or Meissen, I don't know about Meissen, but actually I can, but I think I think they have a long way to go. I think it's even today in a world of high technology, a world where we are everything go faster than we can even imagine it. I think there will be a time, and probably the work of these artisans is something that will not be matched immediately and replaced immediately by technology. So I actually have enormous great faith in artisans and in the manufacturing, and knowing very much what's going on at Sèvres. I know that including the French government and so many people put so much effort to make sure that it survive, and it will continue to survive for many years, that I think it's a good fight to have, and it's extremely important also to see that so many artists, extremely important international artists, are willing to work with that medium and with this artist and with the constraint of a manufacturing, and because it's not always easy when you are a contemporary artist. You are yourself in your studio, and you have just the limit of your imagination. When you work with a manufacturing and with porcelain in particularly, you have also the limit of time, the possibility of what the medium could offer, and you need to adjust. And if you work at Sèvres, definitely you need to learn that's to slow down, and things take time, and you had to learn to slow down at Meissen too, I guess. Yeah. So when you're a New Yorker, and that is, I think it's good lessons that this manufacturing continue to teach us, and I'm always excited to see the number of artists involved in this manufacturing, and their desire to work with this manufacturing. So
Yeah, and that it's a way of life in a certain
yeah.
uh
Another
in
question?
some of these small
Yeah.
towns. Like Meissen was a very small town. Sèvres is probably a very small town. So it's really a company town that's interesting in itself.
You have a question?
Mythology. Could you go back to the shot of the breast cup?
I can always go back to the breast cup. Here we go.
So, allegedly, this was modeled by Marie Antoinette on one of her bosoms. Do we really think a Roman Catholic Queen of France, considering who her mother was, would do this?
First of all, it's a legend.
Okay.
It was created in the 19th century
Ah bon?
by les Goncourt. It was never supposed to be after her breath, and Marie Antoinette never had access to the manufactory and the workshop to be able to do it herself. So,
when does it date?
You need to see go and see the piece. It's definitely not molded after a human breast. But that being said, it was what is the most exciting about this object. I think it's that it's a two-piece. It's a two-piece.
Really?
So the breast, it's really like a ball that stands on the tripod. So what this object was meant, it was to drink milk, and indeed it was made for Marie Antoinette, so it was for a dairy, and she was inviting her friend at Rambouillet and her court, and it was meant to drink milk out of it. And that, I think, it's extraordinary, because you really need to have a breath and to put it back to your mouth to use properly that object.
From
so
when
I think
does
it was
it date?
extremely sorry?
What is its date?
1786, 87. Yeah. Yep.
I have a question for Arlene. Thinking about the history of ceramics, the oldest form of ceramics is probably hand building, including coil building. I don't know if you've done that, followed by wheel throwing, and I don't know if you've done that either. But the really weird thing about the invention of soft-based porcelain is that, as you pointed out, it starts as a liquid. It's a liquid that becomes solid, which in a way is closer to metalwork, to casting in bronze. It seems to me really mysterious and profound and really weird. And I wondered if you might talk about, as a sculptor, as an artist, what that process means to you, and how you dealt with it, all the intangibles of this transformation, this real metamorphosis, which is not like carving or building or modeling, even though those processes can intervene after slip casting. Wonder what your thoughts are about that, the liquid into solid transformation.
Well, that's probably why I was most interested in the industrial molds, because I felt very close to those, because there are molds and everything else. All the coiling, I didn't come there as a ceramicist, so there was no conflict for me. I wasn't like, I did actually ask for some clay, some porcelain, but I only rarely used it, only for making the flowers or stuff like that. But I have a because my very early work was in plaster. Catching time with a liquid turning to a solid is nirvana for me. I love that. I love that. I love that transformation. It's a transformation on so many levels, because the idea of the plaster absorbing enough, exactly, like you have to time it. Each mold I developed an exact time. Oh, this is 7.5 minutes before it gets too hard and brittle, or it's too soft to remove. And that's the way every single mold is dealt with. And so that paying such close attention is, as an artist, that's the business. Paying really close attention.
And in a very interesting way, it's not what you're making with your hand. It's like it's time, it's air, and it's another medium, it's this mold that is doing the process instead of you.
I don't know if it's doing the process. It's yeah. I mean, art is always a collaboration with the material. No matter what material you're working with, and it is also demanding in terms of paying attention. And so I feel like that liquid to solid, and then the miracle of it being hollow, making molds so that the final thing is hollow, because it has to be hollow for those of you who don't know. But seems like an audience where everybody knows everything. But it has to be hollow in order for it to withstand the fire. So all of that seemed,
It's alchemy.
miraculous.
It's magic. Yeah.
Miraculous. It is magic, and it's really it's a very moving process. I totally did not care. They had one thrower left in the manufactory, and I asked, because I'd been through every part of the factory over the years, and I said, "Can I work with this guy?" And they said, "Okay." I had to struggle this guy, and he had an old time kick wheel, and I got to ask him to, I went in and asked him to make some things, but he wasn't really that good a thrower. The thing was so heavy, but that was okay. They didn't really throw things that were going to be functional. They were really just throwing for the rough shape,
Which I accept they still do, and they are very good one. So it's one more question, maybe we can take a few more questions. Julia, you have time? Someone wants to pose? Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. Arlene, you had talked about your passion for the 18th century, and you'd said something along the lines of you really want to take these pieces and make them more available and accessible for audiences today so that they can captivate them. And I wondered, besides just kind of playing with the playfulness of these 18th century porcelain pieces, what else do you do or do you consider when you try to make them accessible and interesting for the 21st century audiences?
I work with whatever museum will have me. So, that's where institutions come in, and I'm always going to places where my eyes are wide open, like, oh my God, look at this, look at what, look at what potential there is that is not exercised. I'm going to talk about the word playful, though. It's serious play. It's not, I have a little bit, I want playfulness, but what I'm really doing is I'm trying to deal with the material as with the same seriousness that I use for all of my sculpture, which I insist is to be seen in the round and to be peaked, to make people pay attention however I can. Mostly I'm making things for myself, by the way, and every artist should and does make them for themselves. But I think that the decorative arts can suffer from the vocabulary of whimsy and playful. So I want to be really careful that what we can do is say those things are amazing and draw people in with specific qualities. When I'm turning something over or showing the backside, it's really because I'm celebrating the fact that those are artists who made things with the same attention, front to back, 360, that I use for whatever, and other people use for whatever reason they do that. So humor, I love humor. I think we can all use it for presenting things, but I do like, material culture is what everybody's arguing about. Like, I'm not in that argument anymore, but should we say decorative art? Should we say material culture? Should we say craft? Should we, all of the lines that are set up, I really don't care about any of them. I just care that the work is dealt with respect and innovation and breaks boundaries constantly.
And with that, please join me in thanking Arlene and Charlotte. There's a reception in the seminar room. Thank you.